Welcome back to the Complete Spanish Grammar, Lesson 7. In this lesson, we're going to be seeing the continuation from the past tense from previous video. In this occasion, we are seeing the imperfect tense. Let's talk about its conjugation first. Well, the conjugation is super simple. If you had problems with conjugation in the preterite tense, it was because there were many irregular conjugations. But in this occasion, it is super simple. And then we will be talking about the irregular verbs. Yes, those irregular verbs that exist in every single time of the tenses in Spanish. Well, when it comes to irregular verbs, there are only three. Yep, there are only three verbs that you have to remember when it comes to imperfect. Let's start with the conjugation. Conjugation is always the same. You have the AR verbs, ER verbs, and IR verbs, the three kinds of verbs that exist in the Spanish language. In the AR verbs, you will be using these endings. Just like we have seen in the present and also in the preterite, you have special endings. You have to remove the AR, just like present, just like preterite, and you have to add these endings. Aba for yo, abas for tú, aba for usted, él and ella, habamos, and haban for nosotros and ellos. Notice that in the nosotros form, you have an accent or a tilde, once again, in the first A. So let's say that you have the verb hablar. Removing the AR, you will have hablaba. Yo hablaba. Tú hablabas. Él hablaba. Nosotros hablábamos. And ellos hablaban. ER verbs and IR verbs are exactly the same idea. You have a special ending, and then you have to eliminate the ending of the verb and just add the remaining letters. So for this ER and IR, you will have the IA endings. Ia, ias, ia, íamos, and ian. Now, if you have the verb comer, for example, you have to remove the ER and add the endings. So for the yo form, it will be comía, yo comía. Tú comías, él comía, nosotros comíamos, and ellos comían. And that is the ending of the conjugation. As long as you remember these two special endings or these two new endings, say in another way, you are safe with imperfect. But what about the irregular verbs? Well, irregular verbs are not that complicated in imperfect. As we just saw, there are only three. Three verbs that you need to remember. They are special because they have special endings or because they behave differently. Now, we're going to be seeing here from the easiest to the hardest. There are only three, but we will start with the easiest. The easiest is ver, the verb to see. So you will say, yo veía, tú veías, él veía, nosotros veíamos, and ellos veían. So technically it's an ER verb. You have the ER ending in imperfect, but you keep the E from the original verb ver. So you will have veía, not vía, but veía. Second verb is the verb ir. This one is always different in every single conjugation because ir is only two letters. You cannot just remove them and have the endings. No, you have to add something. So when it comes to imperfect with the verb ir, you will have yo iba, tú ibas, él iba, nosotros íbamos, and ellos iban. Now, this one is easier if you think that is using the AR endings, but instead of the first A, you have an I. And also remember, you have to keep the accent or the tilde in the nosotros form. The last one is ser. Ser has a particular conjugation. It doesn't really have anything related with the original verb. Instead, you will be saying yo era, tú eras, él era, nosotros éramos, and ellos eran. Remember, The we form has a tilde or an accent in the first letter.
Start learning with a professional teacher. Classes are tailored according to your level, and your progress is important, so keep track of how you're doing so you're always achieving more. Book a trial class and start your language journey now.
The uses. What are the uses now with the imperfect tense? Well, when it comes to uses, you have actually 5. The first one being age, times and dates, old habits. This one I particularly call it old habits because in many books they call it habits in past or past actions. I prefer to call them old habits. Progressive actions, and finally descriptions. The very first one and the simplest of all is age. When you say your age in past, you use imperfect. Always. You always have to use imperfect when you talk about your age in past. For example, yo tenía 20 años en 2008. I was 20 years old in 2008. In Spanish, we use the verb tener, as in I have 20 years old. But in English, you say I am 20 years old. In Spanish, you possess your age. You're not your age, but you possess your age. So that's why you have to always use the verb tener. Yo tenía 20 años. Second, ella tenía 5 años hace 3 años. She was 5 years old 3 years ago. The structure years ago or ago is going to be always in Spanish the word hace, and you have to put it first. Ago, 3 years, literally. So in Spanish, hace 3 años. Hace un año tenía 32 años. 1 year ago, she was 32 years old. In this one, I decided to put it that she was instead of I was, even though it could have been translated as I was. So how do you make the difference between I was and she was or he was when it comes to tenía? Context. Context will always tell you who was something. In this case, who was an amount or who was an age. Times and dates. When you use times and dates in past, you use imperfect. Eran las 5 de la tarde. It was 5 in the afternoon. Era 1988. It was 1988. Era la 1 en punto. It was 1 o'clock. So times and dates is something that is super simple as well. You don't really have to think about this one that much, as times and dates is using imperfect. Old habits. Old habits is the one that I always contradict books or websites when it comes to their description. Old habits is better represented as habits that you no longer do. For example, in English, the construction for old habits would be something with the would or the used to construction. So she would visit her aunt would be the same as she used to visit her aunt. Both of them would be translated into Spanish as ella visitaba a su tía. She would visit and she used to visit. Ella visitaba. The same two constructions in English for one in Spanish. So when it comes to old habits, you have to always remember it's an action you cannot or you no longer do because they are impossible to be done or you cannot do them anymore. There is something that prevents you from doing the action. Let's see. Ella visitaba a su tía. She used to visit her aunt. So either her aunt is dead, so no longer can visit her, or she moved to another country, so cannot visit her aunt, or they got family problems, cannot visit her, or finally, the aunt killed her goldfish, so no longer visit her. Something prevents the lady from doing the action again, but she used to, right? In a routinary action, visit her aunt, but no longer she does it. Progressive actions is divided into two parts. The very first one is you have to understand that a progressive action is something that you don't consciously do, but the action happens. For example, yo vivía en Nueva York. I lived in New York. You cannot actively do the living action. You just do it unconsciously. It's just happening. So when you talk about actions that only happened, but you were not on control of them, you can use the progressive action use. Therefore, you can use the imperfect. Iba a clases de piano. I went to piano classes. Once again, a progressive action. You're not really talking about the movement of going to the piano classes, but you're actually talking about just the progressive action that happened at some point. Cuando tenía 5 años, tenía muchos amigos. Once again, you cannot say that tener is a conscious action. You just have your friends. In the past, you had them. You have to use imperfect. You have to use tenía. Cuando tenía 5 años, tenía muchos amigos. Tenía in the first occasion is about age. Tenía in the second one is a progressive action. The last one is when you have progressive actions with preterite. You can talk about progressive actions, and you can actually talk about actions that interrupt these previous progressive actions. For example, veía Bob Esponja, I was watching SpongeBob, so that would be your progressive action. Cuando el teléfono sonó, when the phone rang. That is the action that interrupted the progressive action. Let's see how that might work with a little bit of images. So, veía Bob Esponja cuando el teléfono sonó. You were doing this action of watching TV, and then the phone rang. So, I was watching SpongeBob when the phone rang. Something interrupted my progressive action. So, when you use progressive actions, you use imperfect if you talk about them in past. Descriptions. Descriptions are not that hard. It is just that when you describe something. In particularly when you describe someone in past, let's say that you describe your kindergarten teacher. So that happened many, many years ago, and you describe how she looked like. Or you describe how the condition of a place was, or you can describe your feelings. That's why descriptions can be used with 3 things: characteristics, conditions, and feelings. Characteristics, like I said, you can describe your teacher from kindergarten. Mi maestra de kinder era bajita, tenía cabello morado y siempre usaba un vestido rojo. También le gustaban las frutas. My kindergarten teacher was short, she had purple hair, and always wore a red dress. She liked fruits as well. So when you describe people or places in past, you use imperfect. Conditions is the second description topic. When you describe the condition of something in past, you have to use imperfect. Era un bonito día. El sol brillaba y hacía un poco de calor. It was a nice day. The sun was shining and it was a bit hot. You're describing the condition, the state of a place, of a thing, or you can even describe the condition of a person. Like, ella estaba embarazada. She was pregnant. That's a condition. She was sick. Ella estaba enferma. That's also a condition. Finally, you have feelings. When you talk about your feelings in past, you have to use imperfect. Cuando tenía 5 años, once again, the age from tenía, quería un Transformers de juguete. And that's my feeling. The verb querer or the verb sentir, most commonly used in the feelings in past, are the ones that have to be in imperfect. Quería un Transformers de juguete. When I was 5, I wanted a Transformers toy. So that was your feelings. Conversation time. We're going to read it slowly first, then fast or normal paced, and finally see the translation. Here we continue with the Spider-Man story that we had on the preterite video. So, terminé con Mary Jane. ¿Por qué? Después de que Spider-Man me golpeó, ya no salíamos y tampoco nos veíamos. Tenían una relación increíble. Así es, pero yo no podía escalar ni me columpiaba con telarañas. Pero estás mejor ahora, ¿no? Siempre veíamos el atardecer juntos y comíamos palomitas juntos. Siempre veíamos el atardecer y comíamos palomitas juntos. Pero ya no la extrañas, ¿verdad? Me tomaba de su mano y me besaba. MJ, te extraño. ¿Por qué me dejaste? Okay, so normal pace this time. Terminé con Mary Jane. ¿Por qué? Después de que Spider-Man me golpeó, ya no salíamos y tampoco nos veíamos. Tenían una relación increíble. Así es, pero yo no podía escalar ni me columpiaba con telarañas. Pero estás mejor ahora, ¿no? Siempre veíamos el atardecer y comíamos palomitas juntos. Pero ya no la extrañas, ¿verdad? Me tomaba de su mano y me besaba. MJ, te extraño. ¿Por qué me dejaste? Let's see the translation. Terminé con Mary Jane. I broke up with Mary Jane. In Spanish, break up with someone is the verb finish, terminar. So, finish with would be literally I broke up with. ¿Por qué? How come? Or why? Después de que Spider-Man me golpeó, ya no salíamos y tampoco nos veíamos. After Spider-Man hit me, we were not dating anymore, nor seeing each other. Tenía una relación increíble. You, guys, had an incredible relationship. Así es, pero yo no podía escalar ni me columpiaba con telarañas. That is right. So that's así es. That's right. But I couldn't climb nor swing with a spider web. So telarañas is spider web. Pero estás mejor ahora. No. But you're better now, right? Siempre veíamos el atardecer y comíamos palomitas juntos. We always used to see the sunset and we used to eat popcorn together. Pero ya no la extrañas, ¿verdad? But you do not miss her anymore, right? That anymore is the word ya in Spanish. Pero ya, anymore. Me tomaba de su mano y me besaba. MJ, te extraño. ¿Por qué me dejaste? You would hold my hand and kiss me. MJ, I miss you. Why did you have to leave me? Why did you leave me, Mary Jane? Practice time. Now you have here these 4 sentences. They are slightly more complicated because you can use imperfect or preterite. Try to guess which one you have to use. And also tell us what you did yesterday. Try using both preterite and imperfect. Tell us down in the comments what you did.